AITA for not selling my car even though my fiancé refuses to sit in the front seat because my ex sat there. Hi, everyone. I'm a 27-year-old guy engaged to my fiancé, who's 26. We've been together for about 3 years, and up until recently, I thought we were on solid ground. We're in the middle of planning our wedding, and anyone who's been through that knows how stressful it can be. Between the guest list drama, budget discussions, and figuring out how to handle seating arrangements, it's been a lot. But honestly, none of that stress compares to the issue that's come up between us lately. It started out small, something I thought was just a quirk or a one-off feeling on her part. My fiancé refuses to sit in the front seat of my car. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. We were heading out to dinner, and as I walked around to the driver's side, I noticed she didn't get into the passenger seat. Instead, she opened the back door and sat there, buckling herself in like it was the most normal thing in the world. I remember standing there for a second, kind of confused, before I asked her, are you okay back there? She just gave me this tight smile and said, yeah, I'm fine. I just prefer sitting here. At the time, I laughed it off, jokingly asking if she was trying to make me feel like her Uber driver. She didn't laugh, though. She just shrugged and told me it was more comfortable. It wasn't until a few weeks later that the real reason came out. We were driving to visit her parents, a trip that was supposed to be straightforward and uneventful. She had, once again, climbed into the back seat without a word. I hadn't pressed the issue too much before, chalking it up to some quirky preference, but by now, it had started to feel off. I mean, who willingly chooses to sit in the back seat of their partner's car every single time? So, as we merged onto the highway, I decided to ask her directly. I started casually, trying not to sound accusatory. Hey, I've noticed you always sit in the back seat. Is there a reason for that? Like, is it more comfortable or something? I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, expecting maybe a laugh or some light-hearted explanation. But instead, she paused. It wasn't the kind of pause where someone's gathering their thoughts, it was the kind where you can tell they're deciding whether or not to say what's really on their mind. Finally, she sighed, leaning slightly forward as if she wanted to close the distance between us without actually moving to the front. It's because I just don't feel comfortable sitting there, she said hesitantly, her voice quieter than usual. That answer didn't make sense to me. What do you mean you're not comfortable? Is it the seat? The view? Something about the car? I asked, genuinely confused. She hesitated again, and then, with a reluctance that almost made me wish I hadn't brought it up, she said, it's because your ex used to sit there. For a moment, I didn't even know what to say. I blinked, trying to process her words, convinced I must have misheard her. Wait, what? I finally managed, glancing at her again in the mirror. You're telling me you don't sit in the front seat because my ex used to? She nodded, her expression guarded, as if she was bracing herself for my reaction. Yeah. It feels weird. Like I'm taking what someone else is. Her tone was calm, but there was a seriousness to her words that told me she wasn't joking. I let out a nervous laugh, not because it was funny but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious? It's just a car seat. It's not like it's engraved with her name or something. She didn't laugh. Instead, she folded her arms and leaned back against the seat, clearly uncomfortable with my reaction. You don't get it, she said flatly. It's not about the seat itself. It's about what it represents. She was there first, and now every time I sit there, I feel like I'm stepping into her place. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, trying to keep my tone even. But it's just a car. It's not like I'm keeping it as a shrine to my ex. I've had this car for years. It's part of my life. Do you expect me to get rid of it just because someone I used to date sat in it? No, she said quickly, almost defensively. I'm not asking you to get rid of it. I just I don't feel comfortable sitting there. That's all. Her words hung in the air, and for a while, neither of us said anything. I kept driving, replaying the conversation in my head, trying to make sense of it. I couldn't wrap my mind around how something as ordinary as a car seat could carry so much emotional weight for her. To me, it was just an object, something functional, practical, completely devoid of personal meaning. But to her, it was apparently a symbol of my past, a tangible reminder of a relationship that no longer existed. The more I thought about it, the more stunned I felt. It wasn't like I'd kept the car because of my ex or had any lingering attachment to that time in my life. It was just a car. A means to get from point A to point B. But the way she talked about it, you'd think it was some sacred relic from a bygone era. It was so far removed from how I viewed the situation that I didn't even know how to respond without sounding dismissive or invalidating her feelings. Trying to be understanding, I offered to sell the car. I figured if it really bothered her that much, it might be worth it to just get rid of it and start fresh with something new. But she immediately shot that idea down. She said she didn't want me to sell it because it would feel like she was forcing me to do something. Still, despite not wanting me to sell the car, she absolutely refuses to sit in the front seat. Every time we go anywhere, she climbs into the back, leaving me feeling like some sort of personal chauffeur. It's not just awkward, it's downright bizarre. And honestly, this car thing is just the tip of the iceberg. Over the past few months, I've started to notice a pattern with her. She seems to have this aversion to anything that's remotely tied to my past relationships. For example, she's told me multiple times that she doesn't want to do things I used to do with my ex, simple, everyday things, like cuddling on the couch during a movie or going to certain restaurants I've been to before. She once asked me if I'd ever taken my ex to a particular park, and when I said yes, she immediately decided she didn't want to go there anymore. It's not like I'm constantly bringing up my ex or comparing her to anyone. In fact, I go out of my way to avoid mentioning my past relationships because I know it's a sensitive topic for her. But no matter how much I try to reassure her that she's the one I want to be with, it feels like she's holding my past over my head, like I'm being punished for things I can't change. What makes it even harder to wrap my head around is that she's still in contact with her own ex. They occasionally text or call each other, and I've never had an issue with it because I trust her completely. I know their relationship ended a long time ago, and as far as I'm concerned, it's ancient history. So I don't understand why she can't extend me the same level of trust and understanding when it comes to my past. The part that really hurts, though, is how she handles these situations emotionally. Whenever something triggers her, whether it's the car, a place we've been, or even a random comment I make about the past, she shuts down completely. She becomes distant, avoids physical affection, and sometimes won't even say goodnight to me. It's like she's punishing me for something I didn't even do. I've tried talking to her about it, but those conversations never seem to go anywhere. She'll either change the subject or say something like, "You just don't understand how I feel." And maybe she's right. Maybe I don't fully understand how she feels. But I'm doing my best to be patient and supportive. At the same time, though, I'm starting to feel like I'm walking on eggshells around her. I'm constantly second-guessing myself, wondering if something I say or do is going to upset her. It's exhausting, and it's starting to take a toll on our relationship. I love her, but I can't help but wonder if this is something we're going to keep struggling with after we're married. What happens if we have kids one day? Am I going to have to avoid taking them to certain places because I went there with my ex? Am I going to have to buy a brand new car every few years just to keep her comfortable? I don't want to dismiss her feelings, but at the same time, I don't think it's fair for me to be held accountable for things that are completely out of my control. I offered to sell the car. I've tried to reassure her in every way I can think of. But nothing seems to be enough. So, Reddit, am I the asshole here? Am I wrong for thinking her behavior is unreasonable? Or is there something I'm missing that I should be doing differently? Update 1. A few days later, we were sitting at home, and I decided I couldn't keep brushing it under the rug. I needed clarity, not just about the car but about all the little rules and boundaries she seemed to be imposing. I didn't want to start an argument, but I needed to understand why things felt so one-sided. If she was uncomfortable with my past, why was she still in touch with hers? I brought it up carefully, not wanting to seem accusatory. I mentioned how I'd noticed that she still communicated with her ex and how I'd never made a fuss about it because I trusted her. I told her I didn't understand why she had such a hard time letting go of my past when she seemed perfectly fine staying connected to hers. I tried to keep my tone neutral, to frame it as a genuine question rather than a complaint, but I could feel my own frustration bubbling beneath the surface. At first, she didn't respond, just sitting there quietly, her gaze fixed somewhere just beyond me. I thought maybe she was processing, weighing her words before responding. But the longer the silence stretched, the more uneasy I felt. When she finally spoke, her tone was firm, almost defensive. She said it wasn't the same thing at all, that her situation with her ex was completely different from mine. Her body language shifted as she spoke, her back straightening, her hands gesturing slightly as if she needed to emphasize the weight of her words. She explained that she was proud of the boundaries she'd established with her ex and how she handled their interactions. According to her, their communication was strictly platonic, just the occasional text or quick call to check in, nothing more. She seemed to take pride in how she had managed to keep things respectful and aboveboard, as she put it. She said it reflected her maturity and character, that she wasn't the type to let emotions cloud her judgment or allow things to cross a line. The way she spoke about it made it sound like she was expecting me to be impressed, like she wanted me to acknowledge how responsible she was for maintaining this delicate balance. She assured me, almost with a sense of superiority, that there was absolutely nothing romantic about their conversations. It was, in her words, simply a way of honoring the past they'd shared, acknowledging it without dwelling on it. But the more she spoke, the more I felt this subtle shift in the tone of the conversation. It stopped feeling like a mutual discussion and started feeling like a justification. And then, just as I was trying to absorb everything she'd said, she shifted the focus back to me. It wasn't just about her boundaries anymore, it was about mine, or rather, what she perceived as my lack of them. She said she wasn't so sure about me in similar situations, that men and women handled these things differently. She spoke with an air of certainty, as if this were some universal truth that couldn't be argued against. She explained that, as a guy, I couldn't be trusted the same way. Her voice took on this almost clinical tone as she laid out her reasoning. She said that if I revisited places I'd been with my ex, places she herself refused to go, it could open the door to temptation or stir up old memories that might lead to something more. She described it like it was a slippery slope, as if the mere act of walking into a cafe or park I'd once frequented with someone else could pull me back into that past relationship. It was as if she believed these places held some kind of magnetic power, capable of erasing all the progress I'd made since then and drawing me into a version of myself that no longer existed. I was floored. She wasn't just saying she didn't trust my ex or the circumstances, she was saying she didn't trust me. It felt like a punch to the gut. I asked her what the difference was between me revisiting a place I'd been with my ex and her actively staying in touch with hers. How could she claim to trust herself completely while doubting me at every turn? But she doubled down, saying that men and women are completely different. She insisted that women are more emotionally disciplined and less likely to cross lines, while men, myself included, apparently, couldn't be trusted in the same way. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here I was, bending over backward to make her feel secure in our relationship, and she was telling me outright that she didn't think I was capable of the same self-control she prided herself on. I reminded her that I'd never given her any reason to doubt me, that I'd always been open and honest about everything. I told her I trusted her implicitly, even with her ex in the picture, and I expected that same trust in return. But she just shrugged, as if trust was something I hadn't earned yet. Then she hit me with the line that really stuck, How can I trust you when you've already done so much with your ex? Her words landed like a slap. It wasn't just about the car or the places we'd been, it was everything. Every moment I'd shared with someone before her seemed to be a mark against me in her eyes. She was treating my past relationships like they were some kind of betrayal, even though they had nothing to do with her and had ended long before we even met. I tried to explain that relationships are built on shared experiences. Of course, I'd done things with my ex, it's what people do when they're together. Just like we were building our own memories now, I'd built memories in the past. That didn't make them any less special or meaningful, and it certainly didn't diminish what we had. But she wasn't having it. She cut me off, saying she didn't want to talk about my ex anymore. She was tired of the subject, and she didn't see the point in continuing the conversation. Just as I thought the discussion was over, she casually mentioned that her ex had messaged her earlier that day. She said it like it was the most normal thing in the world, as if the timing wasn't completely ironic. He just wanted to check in, she said, pulling out her phone to show me the notification. I need to reply to him, but we can finish this conversation later. I sat there, stunned, as she started typing out her response right in front of me. She didn't even seem to notice how dismissive it felt, how completely one-sided the whole situation had become. She expected me to tiptoe around her insecurities, to erase any trace of my past, while she maintained her connection to hers without a second thought. It was like living in two different realities, one where her actions were justified and mine were always suspect. As she tapped away on her phone, I couldn't help but wonder how we'd gotten here. What had started as a simple issue about where she sat in the car had spiraled into something so much bigger, something that made me question the foundation of our relationship. Trust wasn't supposed to feel this conditional, this fragile. And yet, here we were, with her telling me she didn't trust me because of things I couldn't change, while I was expected to trust her without question. I sat there in silence, watching her as she finished typing and put her phone down. She looked up at me briefly, gave me a small smile, and said, "We'll figure this out later, okay?" Then she walked off, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of unease about what later might actually look like. Update 2. After our conversation about her communication with her ex, something shifted inside me. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling of how one-sided everything had become. She had these strict, unspoken rules for me, rules that dictated what I could do, where I could go, and even how I should feel about my own past. Yet, she seemed to operate with a completely different set of rules for herself. It wasn't just about fairness anymore. It was about respect. I trusted her fully, but she couldn't extend that same trust to me. And the more I thought about it, the more it ate away at me. I didn't want to start a fight, but I felt like I needed to make a point, to show her what it felt like to live under the kind of scrutiny she placed on me. So, I decided to flip the script. If she was going to draw these lines around what I could do because of my past, then maybe it was time I did the same. I wasn't trying to be petty or spiteful, I just wanted her to understand how exhausting it was to be constantly judged for things that didn't matter anymore. It started subtly at first. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, and she suggested we order takeout from one of her favorite restaurants, a place I knew she used to go to with her ex. Normally, I wouldn't have cared at all. Food is food, and to me, a restaurant is just a place to eat. But this time, I hesitated. I told her I wasn't really in the mood for it and suggested something else. She looked at me a little puzzled but didn't push the issue. The next weekend, we were planning a day out, and she suggested going to a local art exhibit she'd been wanting to see. I knew she'd been there before with her ex because she'd mentioned it once in passing. Normally, that kind of thing wouldn't even cross my mind, but this time, I told her I wasn't interested. When she asked why, I shrugged and said it just didn't feel right to go somewhere that carried memories of her past. She blinked at me, confused, but didn't say much. I could tell she was starting to notice the pattern. Over the next few weeks, I became more deliberate. Anytime she suggested something I knew she'd done with her ex, I declined or came up with a reason why it wasn't a good idea. I stopped doing certain things around the house that she'd once mentioned were routines she used to share with him, like making her tea in the evenings or helping her pick out a new book to read. Every time I hesitated or declined, I made sure my reasoning mirrored the kind of logic she'd used with me. I wanted her to feel what it was like to have her past constantly thrown into the equation, to have it dictate what was acceptable in the present. At first, she seemed more confused than upset. She didn't understand why I was suddenly so selective about what we did or where we went. She even asked me outright a couple of times if something was wrong, and I'd just give a vague response, the same kind of non-answer she gave me when I asked why she wouldn't sit in the front seat of my car. But then I took things a step further. One day, while we were sitting on the couch, she mentioned that her ex had texted her again. She said it casually, like it was no big deal, and I could feel my frustration bubbling up again. That's when I decided to drop the bombshell. I told her I'd been thinking about reaching out to my ex, too. I kept my tone light, almost nonchalant, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. After all, if she could maintain communication with her ex because it was completely platonic, then why couldn't I? Her reaction was immediate. She froze, her expression shifting from surprise to disbelief. She asked me why I would even consider doing something like that, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to make sense of what I just said. When I explained that it wasn't a big deal and that I thought it might be nice to catch up, she looked completely floored. She insisted that it wasn't the same, that her situation with her ex was different, but I just raised an eyebrow and let her words hang in the air. Over the next few days, I kept up the act. I didn't actually reach out to my ex, I had no intention of doing so, but I let her believe I was considering it. I also continued to mirror her behavior, refusing to engage in anything that could be linked to her past. I started avoiding her favorite shows if I knew she'd watched them with her ex, skipping certain songs on playlists if she'd ever mentioned they had meaning for her, and declining to participate in activities she used to enjoy with him. At first, she seemed more confused than anything else, but gradually, the frustration began to creep in. She started pointing out how unfair it was, how it felt like I was putting up walls for no reason. I could see her growing more and more upset, and part of me felt guilty. I didn't want to hurt her, I just wanted her to understand what it felt like to be on the receiving end of this kind of treatment. Finally, one evening, after another long day of silent tension, she came to me and admitted that she'd been thinking about everything. She said she'd realized that maybe she'd been exaggerating and taking things too far. She admitted that she was starting to understand why I was behaving the way I was and that it had made her think about how unfairly she'd been treating me. She said she hadn't meant to make me feel like I was walking on eggshells or that my past defined me, but she'd let her own insecurities get the better of her. Hearing her say those words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. It wasn't just about the apology, it was about the acknowledgement, the fact that she finally understood what I'd been trying to tell her all along. For the first time in weeks, it felt like we were on the same page again. And while there was still work to be done, I felt like this was a step in the right direction.